Hello, I'm your host, Terry Baylor, along with Ralph Owens. And on today's show, we're going to discuss dealing with the unexpected, being human, and moving forward with intentionality. Hope you enjoy the show.
You have to allow yourself the time to be human. When these things happen, there is going to be an emotional response. You wouldn't be a human being if it didn't, right? And God gave us those emotions for a reason. But what you have to learn how to do is not to make decisions while you're in that emotional state and give yourself some time to process, right?
That's
You don't want
good.
to get hot-headed and go off and give a person a piece of your mind and all this kind of stuff. You want to separate yourself from them, allow yourself to emotionally process. And then when your emotions have calmed down, then you want to take the time to choose your perspective. Because even back then, when I was still at that job, I had chosen the perspective of, I'm not going to let this defeat me. I'm going to become better because I know that all things are going to work together for my good. And even though I don't see the good in it right now, that doesn't mean that good is not coming. So I'm going to
Correct.
continue to be my best. Right.
No, that's great.
Yeah. But I mean,
That's great.
what were your thoughts going through that moment?
So, I had a mentor that I've been talking to, and so I ran the scenario, by them. So and I've grown a lot, man, since that time. I just, I'll just share this, right? Um, the energy that I would spend in those kind of situations in the past would be to seek vindication, to prove folks wrong. And I just, right now, how I feel about it, even looking back on it, I could use that energy in a lot better way. And in that situation, right, I was actually, um, because I was doing my devotions and all that. And man, I'm like, man, I want to fight this. But through the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing, it was like, man, just hold your peace. Hold your peace. So I did. I held my peace. I went in every day. And so just to kind of treetop the story a little bit, I'll just kind of deal with, my exit from there. And because an opportunity came my way. And it was the weirdest thing, right? There was, everyone was assembled in the big room. I forget what those conference rooms were named. And everyone was asked to, give their impression of, what was it like working with me, Terry? And two things stood out. One individual, I'm not going to call his name, but he said, Terry, in some of my darkest times and most rough days, I would speak to you and you would take the time to uplift me and just share life lessons that have really transformed my life. Well, again, I believe the process of not being a victim
Mm-hmm.
and because I could have been very toxic in the information that I was giving this guy, but I wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was probably giving him the same information that I was giving myself. Hey, sometimes you got to encourage yourself. So I was
Mm-hmm.
probably doing that. And the other thing that stood out the most is someone who had probably some insight into what was going on. Um, he shared it. He said, Terry, I can say that you are walking the walk. You are walking your talk is basically what he said. Because
Yeah.
I understand where you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he had a little inside information. I'll say this though, from a anecdotal and how to process it, one of the tips that I was given by my mentor was take everything that you are experiencing right now and everything that you want to say and everything that you feel that you need to say, write it down.
It's good.
So, man, I don't know how many hours, probably a couple hours, and I just took my time and wrote everything that, uh, everything that was going on in the moment, from the from the scenario to how I felt about it to how I want to see vindication about it or where I want to see myself next. And that was probably the single biggest thing that allowed me
Mhm.
to move forward and to get over that hurdle.
Mhm.
Um, and I had never really done writing in that way before. I've always done like, my, bucket list, what do I want to see the next 10 years? What do I want to see, out of
Right.
this 10-year list, what can I accomplish in 5 years? Okay. Out of this list, what can I accomplish in 1 year? So that has kind of been, again, right, as we talked on the last episode about being a task or target driven. I got to get to the top of the mountain type
Mhm.
person.
Mhm.
So everything that I've ever really kind of done in a writing sense has been about what are my goals? How am I going to get there? But that exercise of writing down what and how I felt in that moment, where I want to see myself, how I want to um, see it all play out. Man, it was extremely therapeutic, and it was really felt like I got a fresh start. It really felt
Mhm.
like I got a fresh start after doing that because it wasn't pent up. I didn't have it
Mhm.
on the inside anymore, right?
Mhm.
And so
That's
it
good.
was it was it was a sense of therapy, right?
Mhm.
Just going through that. So
Mhm.
no, I think that's great what you shared, man, and not taking on a victim mentality. And I'm going to say this, right? I think as African American men,
Mhm.
um, man, that's an easy place for us to be.
Yes.
It's an easy place for, let's just be honest. It's an easy place for us to be because the reality is, yeah, I mean, it's not just made for us to just walk through, not have any, everything's going to be smooth sailing.
Mhm.
We come into the office, everybody's giving us high fives. Hey, I'm glad to see you today. It just doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times the road that we are traveling, especially at the levels that you guys aspire to operate at and to lead and to be influential, quite honestly, there's just not a lot of us in those roles. So again, I felt it a huge privilege and an honor to be able to spend the last 9 years or so of my work career working with one of my best friends, right?
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
remember several times where maybe I had something going or you had something going on, and we call each other and be like, hey, man, I just need to let me, allow
Yep.
me to run this by you. Well, here's the thing, we understand that not everyone's going to have that.
Mhm.
Right. So again, that's what we're trying to do leadership sovereignty for,
Right.
right? You may have to take your 10 minutes. That's the one beauty about the show being 10 to 15 minutes here. Let me
That's
go get
right.
me a quick dose. Let me go get me a couple quick tips.
Right.
So, how exactly to deal with these things. So I just want to encourage you, man, to, really reflect and be intentional about how you process what you're going through.
Yes.
Be
Yes. Yes.
intentional about it, right? Let me take some time, one of the books I'm reading, and I'm almost to the end of it, man, it gives some great anecdotal things about when you're in your everyday. So
Mm.
this is, and they talk about how working out, right? And they equate this to working out. They say, hey, if you're sitting in your office and you're in, back to back meetings, 2 hour meetings, hour meeting, it is just as beneficial as, doing a workout to get up out of your chair, even if you're working at home, whatever, right? Get up, walk around walk around the perimeter of your house or walk around the living room to the kitchen there is something that's metabolic about
Mm.
that process and getting up and walking that brings a level of gets your heart pumping. It does, very similar to the same thing that a workout would do for you. And so
Mhm.
it'll give you a refresh. It'll help you clear your mind. Of course, we're not made to sit all day either. So
Mhm.
these little bitty anecdotal things, man, just these small things are enough to just help deal with, some of the complexity, of, being in the office every day, right?
Yeah.
And dealing with people. Because here's what I've learned, right? People are going to be people,
Mhm.
right?
Always.
They're going to have their challenges. They're going to not be cordial sometimes. They're going to have alternative motives.
Mhm.
Sometimes that they just might be outright dirty about it.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
to Ralph's point, let's not take on that victim mentality, because I believe in that it inhibits us from progress and moving forward and taking a positive outlook and action on it. So what do you think about that, Ray?
No, I agree 100%. I agree 100%. It was a very surreal moment. I think in that ride home for 45 minutes when we didn't talk, in my mind I was just processing like, did that just really happen? That couldn't have just really happened. Okay, how am I going to respond to this? Right? And I also learned in that moment that typically when there are people who go out of their way to do something like this, there's an anticipated response that they're looking for.
Oh, you're right.
And you have to be wise.
Yes.
Man, you have to be wise.
Yes.
Do not give them the response that they're looking for.
Oh, yes.
Right? Because that type of situation is so calculated. Before you ever walk in the door, they already anticipate your response. So being able to take a moment for yourself to process your emotions away from everybody else so that you can determine what perspective you're going to take and how you want to present yourself is crucial. You cannot respond to the first emotion that comes to mind, right? Because those are the moments that could make or break your career. Like in a company that you may have been with for 10 years, should you allow yourself to go the route of anger and blow up, it doesn't matter how much good you do or have done, you'll always be compared to that one moment.
Mm.
This is why it's so crucial that you take some time to allow yourself to process your emotions, in private, and then make and be very intentional, like Terry said, to determine what your perspective is going to be and how you're going to present yourself. Right? Because again, some people have preconceived ideas, about us as men, aggressive, loud, whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying that everyone does, because they don't. Not everyone does. But there are some who do. And when you play into that stereotype, then you give them the ability to label you. And that was something that we chose 100% not to do. We were going to choose our perspective. We were going to choose the way we were going to look at this situation. We were going to become better and not bitter. Even if it meant moving on to another location. The reality is this: at the end of the day, if everybody who worked with us at that time was honest, in their own private time, they would say, okay, these two guys walked the line. They did their best. They served with excellence, right? And nobody can ever take that away from me just because. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this: I believe I was at the company for 9 years, had done all kind of great work. I could have ruined it all in that one moment. And from the time I would have left that company, I would have always been compared to that one moment, and everything else that I did for the other 8.5 years wouldn't have meant anything, right? You always take into consideration exactly how you want to respond, and you never respond off of your immediate emotion, because you have to look at the downstream impacts of this, right? Sometimes you even have to, even if it takes you saying, I need this job so I can feed my kids, right? You got to put something in your mind that says, okay, I need to take a step back and control the way that I respond. Because Terry and I say this all the time. This is essentially a game.
Thank you for being with us today on Leadership Sovereignty. Stay connected with us on X, formerly known as Twitter, and on Instagram by searching for Leadership Sovereignty. And just like this podcast, Let's all collectively grow as we go. God bless.